Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a couple of back-to-back customer spotlight sessions. We're going to start off looking at the relationship between Telstra Purple and VicRoads. So not surprisingly, we're joined by Stuart Campbell from VicRoads and James Ormesher from Telstra Purple. As always, we'd love your questions. So if there's anything you'd like to ask James and Stuart about this fascinating partnership, what they've achieved in a real interesting space, fire those questions through. I'll start with you, Stuart. For people maybe outside of Victoria listening to this, tell us a bit about what is VicRoads.
So VicRoads is actually part of the Department of Transport in Victoria, and basically its primary function is registration and licensing. So if you think about registering your car, getting your driver's license, those sorts of things, and it actually represents about 70% of the transactions that people do with government, and it collects billions of dollars in revenue every year.
70% of all the transactions Victorians do with government goes through VicRoads?
Yeah. So, you know, things like registration renewals, driver's licence renewals, those sorts of things, all come through us.
We'll talk about this fascinating project soon, James, but this isn't the first time that Telstra or Telstra Purple have worked with VicRoads, is it?
Absolutely not, no. We've been working with VicRoads for many years, and it's been great preparing for this session and spending time with Stuart and the team to get a really good understanding around that. There's been the customer notification platform, the electric vehicle tax project, and then more recently the robotic process automation project for the service centres, which was a direct result out of the response from the COVID crisis about a year ago. Through these engagements, we've helped VicRoads to really drive their cloud-native strategy, leveraging native AWS tools to the point now where they're in a really strong position that they've got an ecosystem and a platform in place, which is the foundation for their future cloud strategy.
And Stuart, James mentioned the C word there. COVID had affected so many different industries, so many different businesses. Telstra Purple delivered projects in relation to your COVID response. Tell us about the impact of COVID and what your response had to be.
So absolutely, like I'll say, VicRoads is an essential service in Victoria, so we didn't have the luxury of just shutting down the business, collecting JobKeeper for 12 months and calling it a day.
You can't say you just let those licences go, get back to us in a year.
As nice as that probably would have been, we didn't quite have that luxury, but no. So we actually had to devise a way to basically remove a significant amount of transactions from our customer service centre and shift them online. So our execs actually issued a challenge to get 1 million transactions out of our customer service network. So it really sort of challenged our business, and like there were a lot of sort of big ticket things. Hey, what if we transformed this? What if we did that? And we actually relied on a lot of the expertise with people like Telstra Purple to say what's actually achievable in this time frame and going to give us the best bang for buck rather than the obvious things. Okay,
when it came to getting bang for the buck, what were the sort of things you had to change? How did COVID specifically impact for your customers and public across Victoria?
So there's been a lot of unique challenges that have actually come out of the COVID thing. So even today, you sort of look at post-code lockdowns and things like that they tried in Victoria, where it's like if you lived in a certain area, it's like, okay, you now have these restrictions apply. And naturally, a lot of people don't necessarily like those, so they say, okay, I now live in this other postcode that's not affected. So we actually had to work with the Telstra Purple guys to redesign our change of address application online so that we could actually detect when people are saying, oh, I don't live there anymore, and basically manually review these. And that's something that was done in a matter of hours, whereas if we'd done it in sort of the old ways or our typical sort of engagements, it would have been weeks or even months before we could deliver something.
And it's an aspect of the system, I presume, your change of address function. You need that in a system. When you're setting that system up, you're not looking at that as a potential vulnerability that needs to be protected against misuse.
No, and COVID obviously has been quite negative for a lot of people, but it has also created a lot of opportunities. Like we've been able to transform our business in ways and push things forward that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to, because when your hand's forced, you have to do something. You can't just sit still and hope for the best. So it really has been good working with partners like Telstra Purple to actually be able to make those changes.
You automated 12 processes in 5 months. It sounds quite extensive. What role did Telstra Purple play, James? How important was the collaboration between the organisations?
Yeah, hugely important. So we were involved very early in that process to engage with VicRoads to assess the options they had available to them, work with them through that and help them determine what's the right solution moving forward. That was the initial kind of process that took place in terms of the initial hit of COVID, but that continued for many months. And that collaboration has been really, really key to the relationship. This isn't just one project we've done with VicRoads, it's been many projects over the years, which has enabled our consultants and engineers to be able to develop a really good understanding around the VicRoads business, their operating model, their technical environment. And that's then create this really positive collaboration between the organisations. Credit goes to VicRoads that they do come to us in a very open and transparent way. That really helps us to do our job as well. They don't necessarily come to us with a solution, that they come to us with a challenge, and we really work through figuring out the solution together.
And when you look at the size of the team that you've got at Purple, how many engineers and consultants would you have in general? And there must be a pool of knowledge there.
Yeah, there is. I mean, over 1,500 engineers and consultants out there delivering projects like this for customers every day on customer sites. So I think that's something which is important. There's a real wealth of knowledge, there's a real pool of knowledge there to tap into, and something which VicRoads do really well. They really tap into it and they make the most of it.
So Stuart, from the VicRoads end, what was it like working with Telstra Purple?
So I think we sort of touch a lot on collaboration, and like everyone, I'll say in their nice little glossy brochures will be like, we do collaboration, except we find with Telstra Purple it is a genuine partnership. They actually feel like part of our team, and they are as passionate about delivering some of these projects as our own internal staff, and that it makes a world of difference to the success of a project. Some of the things during COVID, like Telstra were working there until 3 o'clock in the morning with our guys and actually delivering those things for the public. And it's a funny sort of thing that, it doesn't matter what shirt you're wearing on the day, like everyone is part of that team that's trying to deliver for the public of Victoria.
James, I've spoken to a lot of geeks about this project and they're actually really quite excited. And one aspect of it that's really interesting is you've got VicRoads, this massive organisation that has such a connection with the community in so many different aspects of operation. You've got Telstra Purple being challenged and really pushing the boundaries of what can happen. But AWS loops in as well, using some of their product and software and platforms to sort of round it out. Tell us a bit about the AWS involvement and how between those three parties you could really push the edge of what was possible.
Absolutely. I think the partnership's certainly between Telstra Purple and VicRoads, but absolutely AWS are a critical part to that as well. I think firstly the technology is key. So the tech has to be feature-rich, it has to be capable, it has to work, it's got to be well supported and all these things. And in VicRoads' experience, that's absolutely been the case, and it's been very, very fruitful for them to develop a lot of their capability on cloud-native AWS solutions. I think the second part to it is then the partnership that comes from AWS as well, which has also been spot on. They've been there to support both of us in terms of the queries we may have around ideas or concepts that we're still developing. And really importantly, they're very clear in saying what they can do, but also what they can't do. And that's enabled us to have real confidence in solutions moving forward.
Okay, we've got time for some audience questions here. You can hit us up in the Live Now button on your platform if you want to ask questions of James and Stuart. One here about implementing change while dealing with legacy systems. And this is a constant thing we hear about when you're going about ambitious digital change. But for an organisation as large as yours, that's been around for a long time, were there issues with legacy systems and constant operability?
Yeah, absolutely. As a large government organisation, we have lots of skeletons in the closet, like I'm sure most organisations do.
Well said.
So we have, the 30-year-old mainframe, the one dude in the vendor knows, and it's a case of, well, how do we put digital services on top of that? And from a customer's point of view, what are their sort of modern expectations? And that's where things like RPA have actually been critical, because it's like we know what the process would be if someone comes into a customer service centre, for instance, and it's a case of, well, how do we get something from the digital side to actually replicate that experience of what a customer service person would be doing? And that's really where Telstra Purple has come in and given a lot of their expertise of this is how you need to make your digital transaction work so that it can work on your legacy systems.
Now, I heard you say the R word there, robots, RPA. When people hear about robotic process automation and things like that, you suddenly think, okay, I've woken up now and it's a Will Smith film, the robots have taken over, it's the beginning of the apocalypse. What is RPA and what sort of experience does it bring to something like the VicRoads project?
So for us, robotic process automation in the old days, people might call it screen scraping and a couple of other dirty words, and IT professionals, to be honest, have generally shied away from it. They prefer the big sort of integrations. But where RPA has been really successful for us is actually in convincing the business to do a lot of this digital transformation, because they can look at it and say, okay, this robot is doing what someone in a customer service centre would do. So they actually get that trust in terms of the digital transaction. So it makes that change management process a lot easier from our point of view to be able to rapidly release these things online to our customers.
Sometimes in larger organisations, if people hear they're going around an automation route or a robotic route, people start to think, well, that's my job gone. Is that the way that RPA impacts in a large organisation like VicRoads?
I certainly hope not. I mean, certainly I'll probably be the first one who'd be out of a job if that was the case. I think it's really about leveraging the technology we've got available to us. RPA as a technology and automation more generally, there can be that sometimes concern around, the effect it's going to have on humans and so on. I think if you look at the projects which we've leveraged the technology within VicRoads, it's probably a project and the systems that we leveraged it with wouldn't have been able to go ahead. The automation tools has made it economically viable to actually go ahead and then to provide that benefit that's come from it.
When I think about organisations like that, I'm in New South Wales, but it's a similar parallel organisation. The amount of interactions that people have with it, The amount of different areas of data they're handing over to these organisations for licences, for health checks, registering kids' sports, all that sort of stuff. I mean, security's come up as an issue already today, and it always does in this area. I presume the security aspects for VicRoads were significant. What were some of the security concerns, and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, so I mean, security is obviously forefront to what we do, because I mean, as an organisation, we collect billions of dollars in revenue for the state government of Victoria, but we also hold the largest source of identity in Victoria as well. So 5 million registered drivers, so we have basically enough info on them so people could get passports, apply for bank accounts, credit cards, etc. So we need to make sure it's secure, and we need to make sure the public is actually trusting in what we do. So security isn't an afterthought for what we do, it's actually ingrained throughout our development process and basically ongoing. So we actually look and say, okay, well, how do we need to secure this? What controls do we need to put in place? How are we going to monitor it ongoing? So it's actually, I guess, one of the big strengths of working with a company like Telstra Purple is that they've done it so many times before, and they can say, hey, there's this AWS technology that does that. You should consider this approach. There's this process that you should look at. And that's really been key to our success. And I'll say we get tested every so often. Like every time it's a school holidays in Victoria, we get some bored school kids that try and attack our website for whatever, don't know why, but you know, it seems to work out that way. And you know, I was going to say touch wood, but doesn't appear to be any wood here, but we've managed to avoid any sort of major incident, and that doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah, as Stuart said, it's not just an afterthought, it's not just a box to tick, it has to be really part of a key part of the philosophy, doesn't it?
Has to be embedded into any solution, any project you're doing. You know, when you're leveraging cloud technology, you're changing your network, you're changing where applications and data are hosted, you're changing how you access them. So it's got to be included as part of that thought process, as part of that design, and embed that security as part of what you're doing.
Okay, so for people watching us today who aren't as far down the path as VicRoads are, but are considering digital transformation, what's a key takeaway? What's your encouraging word to them to make it work within their organisation?
Well, I think I've played around with different ways of sort of explaining it, but it actually is really simple and cliched. It's giving it a go. And, you know, you've probably heard that from a lot of other people as well, but you need to start small and actually build that trust and that confidence with the business so that they actually believe in you and are willing to invest in it. If you go up to an exec and say, I need $10 million in the current environment, you'd probably be laughed out of the room. So it's, you know, you start small. Don't pick the hardest thing to do, because there's probably a reason why no one's done it before. Pick something that's actually achievable and then build out that momentum from there.
James?
I'll build in on some of Stuart's comments there. So I'd say make it a joint effort. Look for your internal champions, look for your internal stakeholders. If it's just the IT or the digital or tech team driving digital transformation, it's going to be a challenge. And the same thing externally. You know, a bit of a shameless plug, but look for good partners, look for good vendors, and leverage their expertise as well.
Wonderful stuff. Stuart and James, thank you so much for joining us. I said there were some very excited geeks about this project. I'm absolutely one of them. It is fascinating. Refer to the left screen panel on your screen to rate this session. We'd really love your feedback in creating and curating future stuff for you. And request a call back as well if you want to hear from these gentlemen or anyone else about any of the topics we've been touching today. We've got another fascinating customer session coming up for you right after this as we continue Realise Cloud.